Hey guys, doing a follow-up video for the stats team. Just gonna complete it and do the research team one now. So it's basically all the same stuff. Being able to look at spreadsheets and draw conclusions from it and see if the evidence is statistically sufficient is kind of a prerequisite for any of this. But the research team is a little bit more specialized towards the game or the sport that they're looking at. So, vision patterns is more of saying, say they're fighting around dragon, where do they like to ward around that dragon pit? So, I'll just kind of draw that. So assume this is dragon pit. Crudely drawn dragon pit. You have the ward, or the river, maybe it's like this, and then you have the tri-brush around there. And then this is red buff over here. And then you have the brush. Oops. You have the brush down here. You have the tri-brush over here. You have the red side brush right here. Or not quite there. Be more like that, I guess. And then you have the suicide brush here, and then you have the other team's blue buff going in like this. So something like that. And then, of course, that's the lane. Then there's another brush over there. Okay, so hopefully that's not too crude. But, like, where do they place wards? Do they place a pink ward up here into this wraparound brush? Do they place pink wards in here? Do they ever really ward behind where the scuttle crab is? Do they ward in the pit itself? How often do they have wards over here? Maybe green wards over here. Do they place wards in here? When do they sweep? Where do they sweep? And it's a lot like the what's required of being able to do like normal parameters such as gold, damage, and wards, but it's a little more based on actions and characteristics or traits instead of parameters or quantities. So this is more of a qualitative analysis instead of a quantitative analysis. But you can still say, given and what you would usually do is have it be on a very transparent color and say, in this game or in this Baron fight, given the gold lead or given the gold deficit, this team likes to ward here, 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 here in a very transparent color. And then you'd go over and you just say, okay, so the first game they like to ward there, in the second game they like to ward there, in the next game they like to ward here, and you just do these density gradients based on ward positions. So, and then obviously the darker the color, because you've been going over it over and over and over again because they've been warding in the same spot, the darker the color means they really like to ward there. And then, or maybe it's they really like to ward there given the condition that they're behind in gold or something like that. And then based on that, at the end of it, you'll have this big graph of Summoner's Rift, or a image of Summoner's Rift with all of these density gradients or something like that, determining movement patterns, warding patterns, vision patterns in general. Where do they like to use their blue trinket? It's not just limited to sweepers. Where do they like to hawk shot? When do they like to hawk shot? Looking at very specific things like that. Team fights, it's more of a like double lift or wild turtle. They really like to go aggressive all the time. How often do they jump in? How coordinated are they? And it gets very specific because you're looking at, okay, are they playing Maokai? When they play Maokai with Rek'Sai, how do they position? Or Maokai with Alistar, how do they like to position? When they play Sivir, how do they like to position? Are there any tells that you can look at determining, like, okay, this player ran up this way and then did this thing? Based on however many games they do this, we can tell that they have a blank probability of engaging right now, or disengaging right now, or this is the thing that we see a lot of in dual lanes. If both dual lane members run up at the same time really aggressively into you when they're both playing like late game disengaged champs, you know that the jungler's nearby. But in the scope of something like this, it would be much more subtle, much more involved. So, so this is more of Dragon Baron setups. How often or do they ward in certain places? How long do they usually take to set up for Dragon or Baron? Do they set up for Dragon 2 minutes in advance with green wards? Do they set up 30 seconds in advance? Do they usually not get the first Dragon? Just different things like that. Lane swap, level 1 habits. Where do they ward in the lane? Do they ward between the inner and outer tower? The frequency of warding in a certain location. That way, if we wrap around this sort of way in the jungle, will they actually have wards to see our dual lane going bottom when they think that we're actually going top? Or based on that, can we show our ADC bottom, know that they don't have vision in a certain area, and then recall our ADC and then have them run top, avoiding the wards on top lane to try and bait a lane swap or the lack of one. So, and that's all that this really is. Drafting habits of opponents, I covered that in the last video. That's more of a, do they intentionally leave Kalista and Alistar up so that if you take Kalista, we take Alistar and Sivir, or if you take Alistar, we end up taking whatever else away from you, or maybe you take Alistar, so we're going to go like Sivir Rise or something along those lines. This is all just the same sort of thing that you would be seeing in the stats team, but a little more involved in terms of League of Legends. So it's not just saying, go through the match history, go through all this and just copy graphs, but now you're looking at more in-game involved sort of things, less quantifiable, more, I guess, yeah, habits, qualitative. Laning phase habits. This is more of a, so I'm gonna just, go like this to reset the, okay, so say we're looking at mid lane. So mid lane, let's just assume it looks like this, where you have your brushes on either side, so it's gonna look like that. I'm just gonna draw this quickly. I'm gonna draw this better. Oh my god, why isn't that clicking? A little bit better. Okay. Holy shit. I need a new computer. Okay, so this is mid lane, holy crap. Awesome. Now, usually in standard laning, the opponents, they mirror each other. So what you would see is, say this player goes up and around this way, what's going to happen is this player goes up and around this way. So now what you would be looking at is you can do a density graph of how often do they do this and how often is it successful or telling of a jungle gank. Because what you can do is say your jungler is coming up this way. You're going to run to the right like this to get your opponent to run to the left into your jungler so that you can cut in so that they go back right into your jungler and then they have to flash over the wall, or if their flash is down, they die. This is just looking at lane habits. But again, since you're looking at top teams, you have to be a lot more specific. And this is something that we always see from GBM or hear from GBM, that he goes over his opponent's games as Xerath so that he can properly predict how are they going to juke for it. This is basically the same sort of thing. Say I'm playing against an Orianna. I see them run this way, and then I run this way. Am I expecting a gank here? If so, how are they going to place their ball? If not, maybe they're placing their ball over here. Maybe they're placing their ball down here and they run even further up. And then they feign back like that. So depending on their movements, what is it telling me? And this is also something I've said in a couple other videos, like, if I've been over here for most of the game, or all of the game at the beginning of the game, and I know they can't have a warden here, or even further down over here, and they run this way, and then I run up like this, just super aggro into them like that, do they know that my jungler's coming down? Or say I just play like this and I back off because I want him to push or something like that. I go like this and I just back off. So now maybe my jungler's top lane and they have that, or they don't have that warded. So then, maybe my laner, or they do have it warded, they see the jungler up there, so my laner is going to push in because they know that there's nothing to be afraid of. So I back off, they just push in. So maybe now, mid lane's not warded, and they come in like this, or my jungler comes in like this, I run back, and they continue to run forward because they think, okay, there's no one there, I don't see the jungler, it's fine, I can push in, and then they burn their flash. So now the third example would be me backing off, my jungler's showing, or not showing, but running into this brush, and then them just backing off immediately. This would tell me that there's a ward nearby. Now maybe it's 4 minutes into the game, or maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes into the game, and there's no way that the mid laner could have warded this area. I know that it's the jungler who warded this area, so I know that the jungler's on the top half of the map, or near mid, so I know that my bot lane's safe, so I can tell my bot lane they're safe. It's just looking at the movement patterns of the opponent. The opponent backed off for no reason when my jungler showed when they shouldn't have had vision of my jungler. Therefore, they have vision of my jungler that they didn't place, so someone else placed it. We know where the jungler is. That's really all that laning habits can tell you. And again, a lot of these sort of things go back into poker. How often do they bluff? How strong of bluffs do they make? Just different things like that. Looking at and reading the tendencies of our opponents. So, are they good liars? Might they go back, or might they go forward when they know our jungler's here, when we know that they don't have vision of our jungler, because they know that our jungler's here and they know that their jungler's here and they have a stronger level 2, or 2v2. So those are also things that we can determine from that. And again, it's all chance, it's all probability, but based on the efficiency of, and the frequency, how often these things occur, we can still be sufficiently statistically sufficient, even if they're just probabilities. Like 80% probability, we can tell using inference methods if that's statistically sufficient to claim that if this person runs up, their jungler is nearby, or that it's sufficient to say that their jungler could be nearby at a very high chance, or that a statistically sufficient chance that we need to get back right now, or something like that, or that they always do this, and we know that they only do this when their jungler is not nearby to bait us in. And this is like the Thresh throws a lantern over into Fog of War to try and bluff into saying that there's someone else here when there really isn't someone else there. And I've had people do that when I know where their jungler is, I know where their top laner is, and then I just type in chat, lol, I know where they are. And it just plays into that a little bit. So that's really all that laning phase habits show. And this is also laning phase trinket habits, laning phase how do they CS habits, when do they go all in with level 2, level 4, level 6 timings, different things like that. And then of those habits, which of those transfer to LCS. So, and this is just saying, based on all of this stuff that we've seen in solo queue, how does that relate to LCS? Maybe they might be doing these overplays and these big aggressive plays that will never be able to happen against an LCS team, but they do these in solo queue to push an advantage. How often do they do this? How often do they do this against LCS opponents? So if it's a mid laner, how often does an LCS mid laner do this against another LCS opponent? And then how often is it successful, and just different things like that. So, do they change how they're playing on stage versus scrims or solo queue? And then region-specific research, that's more of a, as generally as you can put it, how is the meta different in Europe than NALCS? So NALCS, we're still seeing a lot of tanks. EULCS, we're seeing a lot of double AP comps, or even single AP comps, but you're running the AP top laner with the ADC mid. So this would be more Varus mid, Ezreal mid, Jace mid, but then you're running like an Echo, Rumble, Maokai top that are very, maybe not Maokai top, but yeah, like your Rumble, Lulu, Echo, but building Echo Mage and running these top lane mages, maybe Lissandra's going to come back. So it's more of a seeing. And then also, NA and Korea, they're more of a calculated, safer region, I guess. EULCS and China, they're a lot more aggro. They're a lot more, let's just go in and team fight because we feel like we can win it right now. So they're a lot more team fight centric, where NA and Korea, they're a lot more rotation centric. They're more macro instead of EU and China being more micro oriented in how they control their champions in the scope of a team fight. And obviously, you want to be able to, express your information in a logical, easy to understand format. The way they always said that in the stats course is, you're a statistician. The person you're presenting your information to is not a statistician. They're not going to know what mean is. They're not going to know what p-value is. They're not going to know what other examples like standard deviation, spread. They're not going to know null hypothesis, alternative hypothesis. They don't know how to do that. So you always want to give interpretations of your p-values and your conclusions in very standard language, easy to understand. So not just saying that because the p-value was less than the alpha at 0.05, we have to fail to reject the null hypothesis in stating that blank blank blank. You don't give your information like that because people don't understand that. You might say because we only saw this amount of people going less than 60 in this area, we have insufficient statistical evidence to claim that the mean speed of drivers passing through this intersection exceeds, maybe 66 kilometers an hour, and therefore we fail to reject the null hypothesis, which claims that people are speeding, or something along those lines, or claim that they're going the speed limit, rather. The null hypothesis would be they're claiming to go the speed limit, and say, since we don't have sufficient evidence to do so, we can't actually make that claim. And just formatting it in an easy-to-understand way is, don't use technical terms, because chances are the people that you're presenting your information to don't understand those technical terms, so you just want to use easy-to-understand language. And then strong understanding of League of Legends metagames, strategy, theory, highest level. Are you a coach? Do you study the game, or do you just play it and whatever, and this is just, are you a coach? Are you a good coach? Do you understand the game? Are you a challenger player who actually knows the game? You're not just that Riven-only player who ended up getting to Diamond 1. And then able to work with strict deadlines, because obviously if you're preparing for finals and you know you're up against this team this week, but you need to be up against that team next week, you need to have all of your information and your conclusions and everything, like your package that you're presenting to the team, or the head coach, whoever you're presenting to. You need to make sure that that's there ahead of time so that your players can practice that efficiently in scrims before this big match, because if you give them bad information, they might lose the semifinals of the summer split, and then they don't go to Worlds, and then they don't compete against these international teams and get all this experience, and they don't even have a chance of winning Worlds. And that's huge. That's why you need to make sure that you know your shit if you're wanting to apply to this stuff. So yeah, so hopefully that was insightful into what these teams actually do. And there are things to say, like, why did Xmithy go into this brush level 1? It's a bronze mistake, blah blah blah, he shouldn't be face checking. But his analysts may have told him, it's alright to face check this brush because it's a very low probability that there's going to be the team in there. So there's actually analysis work going into that. But again, it could also just be he was face checking because he wasn't really thinking. But it's why did this team go here and then get cut out in the 5v5 at the early game because they didn't ward properly? Well, it's not that they're warding properly, it's that they're warding based on what the analysis, or what the analyst team has told them. You need to ward here against this team because they ward here, they go here this percent of the time. So there is a lot more involved, and hopefully this gives you a greater appreciation for what actually goes into the games, and allows you to look into the metagame of competitive games, and then say, looking at it more of an analyst, and say, I know what goes into the research team and the stats team, so based on that I can look at this game against CLG versus TSM or something and say that, okay, they're probably going to do this level 1, and then be entertained when that doesn't work or when they do something different or something else like that. So just giving you a higher appreciation for the game and what goes into top teams. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.